Welcome back to Logical Magic, examining esoterica. Hey, today my friend Jacob Fluharty and I are here once again, and we're talking about how to have better relationships through healing your attachment style. Specifically, we're going to be talking about what your attachment style might be like if you came from a traumatic background, or one in which you were bullied, or one in which your parents divorced, which can also impact your attachment style. Now, there are 4 attachment styles. I'm not going to be talking about attachment styles too deeply here, but I'm going to name the 4 ones so that people know what the heck I'm talking about. There's the secure attachment style. That's the first one. The second one is fearful avoidant, which is an anxious and an insecure attachment style. The third one is an avoidant attachment style. And the fourth is an anxious or fearful avoidant, which is basically a combination of the 2 and 3. Now, this has to do with fear of abandonment, fear of intimacy, and then people who have had particularly traumatic backgrounds usually have the number 4, which is the fearful avoidant, which you can be emotionally unavailable, you fear emotional intimacy, but you also crave giving and receiving love. It is usually having to do with your formative damage, which that, I ought to get that on a t-shirt. Blame your formative damage is almost always appropriate. Hey, Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing so well. You are just the best sport in the entire world. As I text Jacob and I'm like, hey, I want to do another episode. And he's always like, great, what's the topic? And it's always something insanely weighty that anybody else would be like, great, can I just hit myself in the head with a hammer for an hour? Because that'd be just as fun. And he's like, yeah, sweet, good. I'll be there for that. Jacob, you studied psychology, so you're familiar with attachment style.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And what is your attachment style, sir?
I'm pretty sure I'm number 4 because like you just described, like I've been told that I am not very emotionally available by a lot of people. And I do fear emotional intimacy, especially as of late. But I still find myself a lot of the times being like, oh, but I really miss having that like emotional connection. But I'm also so afraid of getting hurt again. And I'm like, oh, never mind. It's not even worth like, the dance, as Garth would say. Like, I don't want to go through that again, so
yeah, that's a stage in healing. It can be extreme independence as well, where you have burned through your ability to trust others when you did make a foray into relationships, and so now you're in an avoidant place. And frankly, when you're the 4th attachment style, you go back and forth between 2 and 3. And how does your attachment style, how is it impacted? First of all, please release all judgments of self around this. You did not do this to yourself. If you happen to have any of the ones that are not secure, first of all, know that you have a lot of company. This study is from 1982, I believe, where they determined that only 56% of people have a secure attachment style. The attachment style.
Oh, yeah, it is.
It's so
it is not a natural state of
exactly.
For sure, especially not for us in this modern context. Like, yeah.
No, it sincerely, particularly with the rise of divorce, which divorce is a necessary thing. It is better to break a relationship apart than to remain in toxicity, which will cause its own damage. But
Always,
that's what happens. What you need to understand, and it is frequently called being codependent, by the way, which can result in something called the narcissist empath paradigm. There's even something called codependent transference, which codependency can be classified as a form of addiction. Here's the thing. Our understanding of addiction is in its infancy. Don't react to labels. Don't think that you're being defined when you're told you are codependent or you have an attachment style that is X, Y, or Z. You're being informed as to what you need to address to heal so that you can have better outcomes. Now, Jacob, we've talked a little bit about your background, but could you go into it just a little bit in your childhood?
My back. Oh, yeah. So I came from the first stage was the physical abuse that I experienced when I was growing up, which, again, bad. My parents didn't have great examples, and they were just doing what they were taught to do and thought was best. And so that's what that was. And then I kind of got out of that environment and transitioned to, so that was my mom and my stepdad in that first environment. And then I moved in with my dad and my stepmom, and then we transitioned into a more like emotional kind of abuse. So kind of ran the gamut in childhood as far as like, the abusive structures. I kind of got a little bit of everything, which led to a lot of not being able to figure out who I was as a person for a very long time. I spent most of my teenage years, my childhood, trying to please all the adults because I thought maybe that would lessen their negative responses towards me. But of course, it was never about me, it was about them, so it was all for naught anyway. But yeah, and then I became an adult and I could not figure out who I was as a person for a great number of years, because it's just like I'd been told so many things that were not true or that were skewed. And so trying to break through all the things that I built about my personality based on feedback from adults it just took a long time
to recover your core self. And that's, by the way, that's a very normal thing. It's the nature versus nurture argument. You start out being one person and your environment forms you into another. And whenever we're talking about this, I always take the step of saying, please understand, this is not about judging your parents or judging yourself. It is about understanding. Right. And it is almost impossible to do better if you have never seen better. So if you came from a background where there was a lot of toxicity or a lot of abuse, and my background is very, very strange indeed. One of the things that I found out a couple of years ago that really helped me was that in between, my parents met in another country while my father was pursuing his doctorate. My mother had already been married once, and the story had always been told was she was in that country, which was Ireland. She's from Scotland, that she was in Ireland while her parents got evidence that her husband was cheating on her so she could obtain a divorce, because it was that time of the world, basically. Women weren't allowed to divorce without cause in Scotland at that time. Turned out it wasn't true. It turned out that my mother had an affair and with a friend of my grandparents, and was pregnant and was in Ireland giving birth to that baby and giving it away. I do not think my father ever knew this, because God knows he told me absolutely every appalling thing about my mother after they split up. I lived with him. She had a 2-year-old son when he met her. She had just given away a baby for adoption. My brother would tell me about that 2 years ago, and it was the first I ever heard of it. He's fine. He is in Scotland. My half-brother does know him. My half-brother clearly has a different father. She was on a boat to the United States with my father, I think 6 weeks after she met him. So that was 3 months after she had given birth to this other boy. Now, finding out about this was very, very freeing for me, because I had always known my mother did not want me. My name is actually just a boy's name with an E on the end of it. It was a source of a lot of trauma for me. There were a lot of things that made me understand I wasn't really wanted, including that when my mother left, she took my brother and she did not take me. Now, she would try to take me at a certain point, but my father, and I was 6 years old at that time, would show up and harass me constantly at my school. And it was terrible. He would tell me I was dead to him. And adults were appalled, but at the time there was nothing they could do. So she sent me back to live with him. And that's how I ended up with my father. I was only ever with her for about 8 weeks. And apparently there were some charges of neglect at that particular time as well. She was not taken. She didn't want kids. She just didn't want kids. And she lived in a time where it was just an expectation and there was no question. And they told people it's a biological thing. It will kick in. You will know what you're doing. And they were incredibly violent together, right? They were incredibly violent together. They were both only children. So they were both narcissists, quite frankly. There was something a lot more wrong with my father. I'm not really sure what it was. I know that my grandmother was an alcoholic. She's the one who set the house on fire with me in it when I was 12. That led to me, discovering that something talks to me sometimes, and not in a schizophrenic way, in a save your ass way. It woke me up when there was a fire and told me I had to get up because the house was on fire. And that is how I found out that I can channel. And it's not always, and it's, frankly, I can't call it up when I want to. It's not like I have some running dialogue. I'm on a need to know basis like most people. So I was physically abused, I was sexually abused, I was emotionally abused, I was neglected, and then I was bullied, which is a great big recipe for the love of God. Don't do that to a human being. They may not be okay afterwards. And in fact, during my 20s, I was not, and I was a catastrophe to get involved with emotionally because no one had raised me. So I was stuck doing it myself. And I had not seen even one good adult relationship. My only good relationships were with my very liberal Episcopal church, and where I sang in the choir. Yeah, I was a choir girl. And then also I would go to Quaker farm camp for 6 years of my life, which is actually the saving grace of my life. They taught me more about how to treat other people, how to approach the world, how to treat myself. And that's what they say, is that in the life of a severely abused child, it only takes one positive relationship to give them a foundation from which to build, but it's only a foundation. So what I need people to understand, if you have been suffering from toxic relationships, from a fear of abandonment, from the inability to let people in, if you did not do it to yourself, please stop feeling insulted when you were told you weren't codependent. It is a piece of information about how to free yourself from toxic relationship dynamics so that you can know greater happiness, greater self-love, greater experiences in this world overall, and yes, greater and better and healthier relationships. Here's how codependency forms. It is damage to a primary nurturing relationship in your life or a primary social structure in your life. So it can be that you did not bond properly with your mother through no fault of your own. She may have been ill. She may have been uninterested in being a parent, which is what my mother was. They may have suffered from postpartum depression, which I did when I had my son. He seems to be okay. It was a bit of a struggle. And frankly, coming out of that toxic environment, I cannot claim to have known what I was doing as a parent, but I sure tried real hard. And still, it's a learned skill. It's a learned skill. Give yourself permission to understand that if you have any of these attachment problems, if you have any of these toxic relationship dynamics, that it is because you have a foundational emotional injury. Stop thinking of it as an emotional illness or a mental illness or a character flaw. It is none of that. It means that it is a primary emotional need. It is hardwired into you to be able to connect with someone who nurtures you. And then because we are human beings, we are social. If you are also bullied, it is also part of our social structure, our emotional needs to connect with others. If that was fundamentally damaged, you have the ability to go back to examine that damage, to learn better habits, to understand yourself better, and to improve everything. When you are told that you have an anxiety disorder, or that you are codependent, that you are avoidant, or you are fearful, that is not labeling you for all time. That is defining the lessons that you need to learn so you can step out of that box and into a life that is going to give you more fulfillment and greater happiness. Yo, Jacob, how has codependency affected your adult relationships?
um
Like I said, he's a saint because I just drop bombs on him throughout these.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, so like I've shared with you before. So like as soon as I was able to move out of the house, turned 18, got out of high school, I moved in with the man that I was dating at the time. And my adult relationships have been marked basically as me. I think I've said it in a previous episode even that I spent a lot of my adult relationships being taken care of. I would attach myself to people who like I didn't have to be the adult anymore because I feel like I had spent so much of my childhood being that adult. And so whenever I became one myself, I went kind of loose. I didn't care about my responsibilities, and I connected with people who were able to take care of me because I was just, I guess, stopped taking care of myself, so to speak. So none of my
Can I pause for just a second? Because it's important that we address exactly that, because there's a very good reason that you did that. It is because it is an actual psychological need to be taken care of. Babies come into this world helpless. So it's not that you were avoiding your adult responsibilities. It's that literally something that you needed to have a fundamental emotional foundation was denied to you, not through any fault of your parents. They were young. They didn't know what they were doing. They were only repeating what they saw. Please understand that. Your path to healing is always about stepping outside, taking a greater perspective. And healing can free you from everything. Emotional healing can be taxing, it can be difficult, but it's so worthwhile. I'm sorry I cut you off. I just wanted to
Yeah,
kind of
no, of course, yeah.
it's not about fault, it's about you needed to be a child. That's what that was. Your like deep down psyche, because I did it too. And like I used to be the most independent person in the world, but I was in a 20-year marriage for somebody who had all of the power, all of the control. And it gave me the opportunity to heal and to grow and to finally put together the building blocks of a full person and to have full self-worth, because that is what was damaged. That relationship that we're talking about with nurturing develops your ability to have faith in self, to have self-love, to see yourself as someone who is lovable. If you had love denied to you by your caretakers, the question forms in your mind, am I not lovable? And it's not about that. It's about the other person not knowing what they're doing either. Please go ahead.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
so sorry. It just
yeah.
that's
No,
such
it's
an important
no.
point.
You're totally fine. I mean, it's just that's kind of what marked my adult relationships was me constantly seeking validation, in many different ways. I, for the most part, while I was seeking emotional validation, I found it through physical validation. If that
Right.
may follow that trade. And so yeah, until I met my now ex-husband, like those were my relationships. I was with people who I could feel better about myself through physical validation. And so that's where like all the infidelity and like all that came, because I was constantly chasing that next dopamine hit, right? Of like the new and exciting, like someone's validating me. Someone thinks that I'm, attractive or interesting or funny. And so I'm like, was constantly chasing that no matter if I already had it at home or not. And, so yeah, I made very unhealthy adult relationships across the board. Even though eventually we did get married, my ex and I, like it was a very rocky relationship. I mean, he was also codependent, and so we were just feeding off of each other in that respect. And we eventually came through years of therapy and lots of work together that we were able to recognize that about each other and kind of grow a little bit, which of course did lead to the dissolution of our relationship. But that's not a bad thing, because like we both grew out of that situation. It was a great 10 years. Neither one of us regret any of it. But I think we're both a lot happier now because I'm not gonna speak for him. I can speak for myself in that for the first time in a long time, I felt good with myself this past year of, choosing to be single and not, seek relationships or validations through them has been really great. I've learned a lot about myself and how to be alone, and that growth was really great for me. And it's something that I never would have been able to do had I stayed in that relationship, or any relationship for that matter.
Well, and that you've also, like, part of the reason I want to talk to you about this is that you've hit multiple milestones that are important on the road to healing an insecure attachment style or an avoidant attachment style, or what we also call codependency. Now, one of the things that you referred to is that need for validation. Now, I was sexually abused, so the whole idea of somebody wanting me for a long time, and particularly in my 20s, had way, way too much power over me. That was the most validating thing that could happen. And because of basically some genetic things over which I had no control, I was able to attract partners because both of my parents look like B-grade movie stars, because they just did. And when I look in the mirror, I see somebody who looks a lot like both of my parents, but it did help pave my way when I was younger towards more validation of a very unhealthy fashion. That's a very poor way to value yourself in the eyes of others. Learn how to value yourself in your own eyes and to start healing yourself. And
because I was seeking that I didn't have a self-esteem at all, and so
exactly.
I couldn't create those feelings on my own, so I had to find them somewhere else. And the easiest way to do that was to have someone sleep with me, because that's like, in my mind at the time, was
That
like the
made you
ultimate,
want it.
like,
It made you
yes,
want
like there's the self-esteem I need. Like, I don't have to feel good about myself because this person is doing it for me. So it sounds, oh god, as I say it out loud after the fact, it sounds so gross, but I mean, it's just what I was. And there's nothing wrong with, I mean, just, I still need to grow from it, but like, I don't look back on it in a negative way. It was just growth and healing a lot. But yeah, it's weird to think about now.
right? Yeah, that's the important thing. What finally happened for me was I got old enough that I started looking at my backstory, because it was far enough in the past that it no longer had a lot of emotional import to me, and I'm perfectly safe when I talk about these. Like it's actually like poor therapists, whenever they've heard about it, have like withdrawn and withdrawn and withdrawn, because their eyes get bigger and bigger, because it's like you're genuinely not supposed to do all of that to a person. It can result in terrible, terrible dysfunction. And I just got lucky. I just got lucky in so many different.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When
Same. Yeah. Yeah.
you talked about the newness, that chasing after something, the always looking for a new relationship even when you had love, that does have to do with a chemical that is released in our brain, oxytocin, that is
Mm-hmm.
released as a love chemical, and that is why it can start to form into almost a form of addiction, where you're seeking out that high, that feeling of connection that is not actually a feeling of connection, but rather the feeling of the release of a chemical within your brain. What can also happen to people who have CPTSD or PTSD, now long-term abuse survivors almost always have complex post-traumatic stress disorder because they were trapped in the situation and it defined everything. And when I started to consider myself as a child, I was like, good God, that's a lot of stress to put on a little person. And I lived in an empty house, and like it was just very, very weird crap. So I finally got to the point where I stopped judging myself and was more like, wow, it's a miracle I didn't turn out worse. Because I stopped looking just at my mistakes and instead was like, yeah, for coming from that, it's a little bit understandable. I wouldn't judge anybody else. I'm not going to judge myself. And try to get into that space if you are also trying to heal. If you have had unsatisfying relationships, the first thing you need to do is to learn how to talk to yourself appropriately, because the voice that you hear in your head is not your voice. We are all programmed. We are all programmed. It was how your caretakers or your peers approached you. It is the voice of your fear. It is not the voice of yourself. And so the easiest way to start counteracting that, and I have my clients do this all the time, and please keep in mind, I am not a registered or a licensed anything. So please remember, therapy does exist. There are very good trained professionals who can help you in depth. One of the reasons that you and I go into this is that not everybody has access to them. Not everybody can afford them. And then also, it helps to talk to somebody who is owning their own stuff. Therapists are always at a remove. So when I'm talking to people in tarot through the, life coaching and the healing stuff that I do, I try to get them to understand how to start reprogramming their inner voice to be their biggest cheerleader rather than their biggest detractor. Because if you suffered abuse, chances are very good that your inner voice does nothing but tear you down. And what you need to do to stop looking for love in others is to find it first within yourself. And that's what they mean when they say you have to love yourself first, which I like. The reason I use the mocking tone is that people do not expand on that. And it sounds like yet another judgment to somebody who is struggling. It's not a judgment. Mm-hmm. It is telling you that the building block that you are missing is a good self-image, which is what people with that secure attachment style have, because they're not looking to another person to fill in a gap in their own foundation. And that's what we need to do when we're trying to heal codependency, when we're trying to heal an attachment style, is to look at our foundation, our formative damage, our formative experience, sometimes called inner child work, to see where the gaps were. And the first and the easiest step to take in healing that attachment style is when you think of yourself and you have made a mistake, what do you say to yourself within your head? How do you react to it? If it is fearful, you are likely in an environment where it was not safe to make a mistake. My mother used to literally beat me and call me stupid if I made a mistake. I put my pants on backwards when I was 7 years old once. She beat me so badly I peed. Like it was really, really like, and by the way, I'm like, trigger warning, I guess, with almost anything that we talk about. I'm fine now. But I had to go back and look at all of those things for why did I never have any self-confidence? Because all throughout my life, people were like, you should have been to this, you should have been to that, you're so remarkable in that, you're so remarkable in this. I didn't believe in one tiny word of it. I thought they were all insane. And it's because the person who gave birth to me had deep, deep, deep resentment issues towards my existence, because technically she didn't want kids. Now, I'm making her sound really bad, but you should have met my grandmother on her side. She's a very understandable person. I held no resentment towards my mother. I cannot have an interaction with her because she hasn't healed her stuff. She's just a toxic person. And so I cannot have interactions with her, but I understand her and I release any resentment that is holding me back from my own growth. And the way that you start doing that is you start talking to yourself like your biggest best friend. So if you're facing something that is daunting, you talk to yourself about like, hey, I know this is hard. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. Start talking to yourself in you statements because it's what you didn't hear. And it's what you do need to start hearing to overwrite that inner programming. One of the tools that I tell clients to use is to record themselves on voice memo while they're journaling. Learn to talk to yourself, man. You need to hear that encouraging voice. Other people think it's
Yeah.
weird. So what? They're weird too. You just can't see it as easily.
Right.
Learn how to be on your own team first. And that starts putting in the missing piece that you were looking for in another person, the validation.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Now,
I mean, yeah, once I took me to my 30s to get to this point, but I moved to Wisconsin. I was in a new environment, which I think was super helpful. I'm not telling everyone who has trauma to move away from home and whatever, but that was really helpful for me to get out of the environment that I was in here in Central Arkansas, because everyone around me was that same kind of group that kind of helped carry me through my 20s whenever I was so horribly bad on myself. But yeah, once I found that self-esteem and that confidence, everything just kind of changed. It was like a light switch that started that healing ball down the hill, even though it kind of sucked along the way.
well, you talked a little bit about moving away. I did the same thing. I moved across the country, to a place I had never been, and I have literally never really gone back. I mean, I went back to visit twice, and that's about it. I'm from the East Coast, but I ended up in the middle of the country. Now I'm in the West Coast. So I literally put distance between that view of myself, which was always being reinforced, because my half brother and my mother's favorite hobby was to pick on me, to make fun of me. If I it was that they were I look back and it's holy God, they were terrible bullies. They weren't terribly mean spirited about it, but they were always making fun of me. And they that's not a fair thing to do to somebody, including the fact that I had been through so much trauma. It's absurd. Houses being on fire, people dropping dead. They were all there was a lot going on. There was a lot going on. They weren't malicious in it. And that's another thing to remember, is that most of the damage, now it can be malicious. You can have somebody who has a personality disorder in your life. You can have somebody who's severely mentally ill. My father was severely mentally ill, and he was a treat to live with. I'm sure the neighbors were terrified of him. He used to do things like dig holes in the backyard at 3 a.m. in the morning under a naked watt bulb that was about 100 watts. They had to have been oh my God. But again, different time, different reactions. So when you move to a new place, you got to inhabit a different version of yourself. Now, you can still do this while you're in a geographical area, but that's the key. That is the key, is allowing yourself to interact with others in a way that they are not reacting to who they have been told you are or who you believe yourself to be. Your family has reinforced that over and over again. Now, you have since gone back to your home state, right?
Yeah. No, I am back in Arkansas, and I would like to say that we're talking about geographic, locations. I would like to think that all of the lessons that I learned moving away and all the confidence that I had gained remained when I moved back. But there was something about coming back home where I kind of slid into those old relationships because, that was the safety net. So I needed it at the time. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, no, I definitely struggle with reverting back to that, early 20 something who didn't have the self-confidence, didn't have this. I find myself in situations currently that 5 years ago would not have been this difficult or whatever. I put myself in social situations that I feel that same anxiety and that same fear that I'm back home that I didn't feel when I was in Wisconsin, which was really strange. It was not what I didn't expect that at all. I was oh, I'm so confident now. Everything's great. Nothing can touch me, blah, blah, blah. And then I moved back home and I get back into those, into this environment and those groups of friends. And it's just, it almost put me right back where I started. Yeah, I almost regress super hard. And so it's a struggle even today that I'm dealing with that. I could have examples this weekend of just feeling afraid that I had done something wrong in my friend group, I know I hadn't. And I don't know, it's always a process, I guess.
But here's something that you, and anybody listening to this, and I said, I have a feeling this is going to be an extended series because it's a really, really deep topic. And what you're talking about is a form of regression that occurs because of triggers that are not just about emotionally stressful situations. Your environment is something that when you are in a church, you act a particular way, right? When you're in a school, you act.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're in your home environment, if you have practically worn a groove into the energetic universe through dysfunction that was no fault of your own, if you go back to those environments, understand that you may in fact struggle with regression. Healing, as you and I are always talking about, is not a straight line. It's not meant to be.
Right. Hmm.
There are, and challenges are the ways that, like, I will tell you honestly, and this is the woo-woo part of me, because I'm so down to earth for a spiritual worker, but here's the reason why. In everything that we do, there has to be an element represented, the elements of reality, which are fire, earth, air, and water. And earth is the very 3D energy. So what we're talking about here is an element of healing. You can combine it with spirituality to great effect, to great ends, but you need to understand the building blocks of the 3D of the very practical world to really anchor it and to root it and to help shield and protect yourself as you go forward. You need that base practical 3D knowledge to fully understand yourself, and it does not negate spiritual journeys, nor spirituality, nor spiritual evolution. So what you're talking about is the actual physical trigger of being in a known environment and reverting to who you were rather than who you became in a separate environment.
Hmm.
And it's very, 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 very normal. Being aware of that kind of thing, because you do have an educational background in this, is it helpful? Does it help talk you down from your ledges when you get there? Because I know I have to talk myself down from ledges all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean that's one of the great things about being in therapy as long as I was and need to get back into, and also having the educational background that I have. It's much easier now that I have these tools to kind of talk myself down out of them, because previously, like had I had like a situation that I had maybe like 2 weekends ago, where I thought that I had done something wrong, and a friend of mine was mad at me. Normally, I would have shut down. I would have started crying immediately and walked out of the bar and probably never looked back. And because I was just like, well, I can never be seen again. I messed up that badly. But now I'm like, okay, silly. Let's think this through for a second. Like, what actually happened? Like, so yeah, like it is super helpful, and that's why I tell everyone, almost everyone could do with maybe a couple of months out of the year of some therapy work, just because the tools that you gain are super helpful to manage these acute triggers, as they were. Even if there's nothing really like quote unquote unbalanced about you, everyone can benefit from learning these tools, because we're all going to have these acute moments where we're going to need some sort of something in our toolkit, so
Oh,
to speak,
absolutely. A
to
greater
help us
understanding
through.
of self. A greater understanding of self is your biggest tool to healing. And as I said, this is likely to, like, we can't get it all in an hour-long segment, guys, because it's a really deep, deep subject. So today we're talking about the role of talking to yourself appropriately and the idea of gaining a different perspective, which is ego death in the spiritual community, where you step outside of yourself. What I described about looking at myself as a child and understanding I didn't stand a chance. It's amazing. I knew how to wipe my own butt and blow my own nose like nobody raised me. Holy God. No wonder I was a wee bit of a feral creature as I went through my 20s, creating destruction wherever I went. And that makes me sound terrible. And I wasn't. I just was not. I was not able to have fulfilling emotional relationships, because as soon as I truly felt connected to somebody, the part of me that was convinced that they were going to begin emotionally torturing me ran away. And I can see that now, but at the time, here's the thing. When we're talking about spirituality as well, there's the twin flame dynamic, which is sometimes also the narcissist and the empath paradigm. Sometimes a twin flame connection can actually be codependent transference, where rejection, because you experienced it at such a young age, can hold too much power over you. So you can have difficulty accepting that somebody may have moved on, or that you're not for somebody. That is always a gift. That is always a gift, by the way. If somebody is trying to walk away from you, let them. They either have work to do or they have a different path than you. And it's not about your worth. Please do not confuse your self-worth with whether or not the person that you're attracted to, because that's all it is. It's an attraction. We don't know anybody deeply until we know them deeply. If somebody who you are attracted to is not returning that attraction, that does not then mean no one ever will be attracted to you or you are somehow repulsive. It is that you and that person were not meant to mesh together, but you can learn things about it. One of the things that people need to be aware of if they have CPTSD, which can cause dissociation through triggers. And dissociation is essentially your mind moves to another time and place and is almost, you retreat into an inner world. And one of the things that can happen with twin flame dynamics is that people who are prone to dissociation, again, through no fault of your own, it's something your brain did because you were terrified as a kid. This is that gift I had where I started looking at myself with the same level of judgment I would a perfect stranger. And I'd be like, okay, so your parents literally were trying to kill each other. Like literally, people were getting their heads pounded on the ground, all kinds of stuff. It's like, no wonder you were terrified. You weren't safe from the day you were born. And when I realized, oh, that's me. That's me. I literally had people who tried to kill themselves around me sometime I was tiny. And they were insanely violent. So no wonder I have all kinds of anxiety problems. It took me a long time to build a feeling of self where it's like, no, I keep myself safe. And I don't need to do it with a bazooka. I don't need to blow up. I need to be secure in what other people do is about them, not about me. And that when things arise, I have a really strong track record of figuring things the fuck out. And so I will probably consider to continue to do so. I rarely swear on any type of recording, but I'm going to mark it as explicit. So feel free to drop F-bombs galore after this, I suppose. But that one is so important for people who are suffering from an insecure or an anxious attachment style, is to understand you don't need another person to keep you safe. You need you. You need to build you. And once you've built you, then the people who would take advantage of those vulnerabilities can't get to you any longer, and you are safer just because you have you. And that is what we're working towards with reprogramming the inner voice, where you talk to yourself as if you're talking to someone you really care about. And frequently it helps to talk to yourself as if you were talking to a 6-year-old that is in need of a nap and a snack, because it is that part of you, that little kid part of you that needs taken care of. When your fears rise up, and they're disproportionate to what is happening around you, when your anger rises up and is disproportionate to what is happening around you, it is tapping into something from the past. If you can go back and never push yourself past the point of emotional safety, and if you are prone to being triggered, it is very important to seek out professional help. Somebody who is skilled in this, who can help you understand your feelings and help you build a safe response system. But you can actually learn how to take care of yourself when you are triggered so that nobody else can make it worse. Because from the exterior perspective, when somebody is triggered, they're dealing with an adult who no longer has adult capabilities through no fault of their own, because they've been rocketed back in time towards something that was emotionally devastating, terrifying, or making them feel as if they were about to be left. And when you are helpless as a child, the thing that has the most power in the world over you is not being taken care of, because you cannot take care of yourself yet. Please stop judging yourself if you have damage that relates to any of those fundamental needs. You didn't do it to you, but you can fix it. So Jacob, you did the smartest thing yet. And I have been single for kind of a long time because I was so traumatized from a terrible relationship, quite frankly, from a person who had all his own wounds. We're not like here to vilify anybody or demonize anybody. I have taken the step where I have decided I am going to simply enjoy my own life. I am going to walk a path where I build my own success. I do my own thing. I have my own interests, because I'm very happy by myself. When I looked back at that long-term relationship, I was actually very happy because I spent so much time alone. Now, when he was there, I was not as happy because he was somebody who had very reactionary moods and would control people with his moods. And in fact, there was a lot of damage to my trust. Some of those things I did not find out until after the marriage ended. And as I started to be more and more healed, I decided I was going to stay in this single state unless I just happened across somebody who was right for me, which I'm a little bit out there and a little bit peculiar. My idea of fun is, studying ancient Mesopotamia. That's what I was doing last night. It's not likely that I'm going to round the corner in CVS and meet some dude. It's just not. But that's okay, because I'm super duper happy as I am. And I can take care of myself. And these are all things. I did not have a therapist. I was just able to figure these things out. I went to therapy when I was in my 20s, and then again for like 6 months in my 30s when I had to have an operation, and like they put me on an anxiety drug for a hysterectomy, quite frankly. And not since then. I'm just kind of gifted at being able to understand what is needed in a traumatic situation because I went through such a pitched one. And please understand something else. If you have trauma that is pronounced, it means that you have red flags that you can't ignore either. Start looking at the red flags that you throw off: being too clingy, being too needy, investing too much in a new relationship. That's the one I see from codependent people all the time. Nothing that will make me flinch more than somebody coming into a reading, because I love all my clients, and saying, I think I met my person. And it's like, oh God. Oh God, if it's been less than 6 months, I am so apprehensive looking in those cards. And sometimes they're right, but just as often they're not. They're seeing who they wish that person to be because they don't fully know them yet. In a new relationship, we are talking about how to heal your attachment style. And this is one of the clues and one of the gifts to do it is do not overinvest too soon. You cannot know somebody until at least 6 months, and you need to have weathered one significant argument. You need to have weathered some significant exterior stress factor, whether it's a car breaking down, a job loss, parent dying, whatever it might be. It is, you will not know the true nature of the person that you are with until you have seen them respond to stress and you to responding to stress within that relationship. And so that's one of the litmus tests and one of the things to go past. Put yourself on a delayed response system when it comes to forming commitment. And that is one of the ways to begin healing an unhealthy attachment style. And so, Jacob, I'm going to go back to you because you did that. We were talking about it before you ever did it. Treat it like an addiction. It's not really an addiction, guys. It's a compulsivity. And at a different point, I'll go into the difference between that, but we're getting into really weighty stuff. You need to treat it like you're getting sober and be single for 1 year to learn how to be happy by yourself. And the reason that you need to do that is that if you are not able to be happy by yourself, your happiness is dependent, not a good word, dependent on someone else, which means they have too much power over you. There is nothing wrong with wanting a relationship or dreaming of love or valuing romance or thinking about soulmates. But your experience that you only have in minute to minute, moment to moment needs to be fulfilled, whether or not the love of your life is right beside you, because ultimately we are all our own person. So you have been on you just completed it, the full year of being single. How'd it go?
Yeah, it was awesome. I expected to hate it, actually, but no, I had a great time. I learned a lot about myself. I didn't really, it was nice learning how to sit by myself and deal with my emotions on my own. And because that's something I'd always had someone around to kind of like be my emotional crutch. And so, I mean, don't worry, I still had people that I reached out to, like, I'm not saying that I was alone and like across the board, but like I didn't have someone to put all of my emotional eggs in their basket, so to speak. Like I didn't have someone to like just trauma dump all over all the time. And that was nice because like, there were certain things that I didn't want to share with, everybody. So I had to learn how to deal with that on my own. And it was really good. And I'm seeing some of the benefits of it, now, because like, yes, the year is over, but I'm not like actively seeking a relationship by any stretch of the understanding. But for example, he'll never hear this, I'm sure, so I'm going to talk about it. I met someone a couple months ago, and I was like, okay, we just been talking on and off as time has gone on, and we finally went out this weekend. And you basically just described me a minute ago. Like I do have that tendency to kind of go head first into a new romantic relationship. Oh yeah, like I'm like I don't love bomb or anything. It's not that bad, but I definitely, I'm having to watch myself be like, okay, well, like you don't need to bother them while they're at work, like don't text them until after, now maybe being a little overly cautious, but I would rather that than the alternative to what I have been doing in the past, whereas like, my past relationship.
Oh, you're breaking up.
We started dating, and then we were.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we were dating, and we moved in together really, really fast, and like it just everything was moving very, very rapidly.
Oh no,
Because
that was the
yeah,
relationship, the brief
yeah,
relationship that you had that I think illustrated to you the need to heal. And he's a perfectly nice young
100%. Yeah,
perfectly
yeah. Oh
nice
no,
young
no,
man. But
like
every time I saw a
yep.
picture of the two of you, he was all in, and you looked like you're like, can I have this removed?
And it was so funny when you said that to me. I almost wanted to call you a liar, but then I went
Went
back and I
back and
looked at
looked at
those
the
pictures
pictures,
that you were
didn't
talking
you?
about, and I was like, oh, damn, she was right. Like you can, like I didn't feel at the time. I would not have described it that way. I thought I was perfectly happy, but you're right. When I go back and look at those pictures, I'm just like, oh wow, you can definitely tell that there's this is not matched up. The amount of
One of these things is not like the other.
into this. Yeah, yeah. He was way more into me than I was into him. But I didn't realize it at the time. It was hindsight 2020 nonsense again. But you're right. That relationship definitely was my like wake up call. Be like, bro, you need to figure something out because you're gonna. I did ended up hurting him greatly because we finally just had the conversation. We're just like, I'm just not that into you, because I went too deep, too fast, chasing that feeling that I was missing, and I ended up, blowing up another relationship. And like we're fine now, ish, but like, yeah, no, it was a very hard
Well, and
breakup
please understand,
on
like
his end.
you learned important things there as well, because you were not the only person over investing too soon. He was as well, and this is not a judgment of him. Again,
Sure.
just a product of his own environment. And then the other thing that I remember you doing was when you first moved back to your home environment, you had a little bit of a spiral. And one of the things that happened was you met this person as you were coming out of it. And I think you associated having a relationship with getting out of like the chaotic spiral that is very, very normal when you were like, oh my God, my entire
Yeah,
life.
that is true. Yeah, yeah. I did hit that really like my rock bottom that time right before I met him. So yeah, I can see. Yeah, those two kind of did.
And we saw him in
Yeah,
cards. We saw him in cards, and I told you what he was like, and you're like, "Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that." And then it's like, and then you did. And we
and
do
then
that
I
with each
fucking
other
did it.
all
Yeah,
the
the
time.
next month. Yeah.
We read for each other, and like we're always just like, "He is insane. She is insane." And then like 2 weeks later, it's like, "Well, you were right." From both of us, we're always going back and forth on that. And then like, hey, Jacob, not to like expose your personal stuff any more than I already do.
No, it's here. Let's do it.
You're being single for a year is not the same thing as you being celibate, because you have not been celibate. And that is one
Oh
thing that
gosh, no. Oh no. It
being
just means that. So
single for
for
a year
me,
does
yeah, the
not
way
mean
that
not having sex.
yeah, the way that I looked at it was just that what my issue that I needed to work on was my emotional involvement with other people. How deeply I got into someone else's business and how deeply I let them into mine. I don't know how to put that more eloquently.
You enmeshed your
Um,
minds very quickly. It's called enmeshment.
yeah, no, I just like I wanted that emotional stability of someone that I could talk to, someone I could rely on. But at the same time, I wanted to be that for them as well. That codependency kicked in real hard. And so yeah, that's what I meant by that. I had to figure out how to self-soothe almost,
Uh-huh.
and not be so wrapped up. Now I may have overcorrected a little bit because I have been told, as I shared with you last week, in a personal conversation, just like I've been told that I'm, emotionally unavailable and like I'm afraid to let people in and blah blah blah. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I'm not seeing that as a negative anymore. You may not agree, but you didn't live my life or my experiences, so I'm going to be much more guarded moving forward about how much I open up to somebody and how quickly. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, if at all, because I feel like for me as an individual, that is what is necessary. Because otherwise, I will fall back into, that mentality of just going too far, too fast.
We all love falling
And
in love, but
other people are just going to have to be okay with that.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. The
and
right
whoever
people
I
are
end up with
okay.
is just going to have to be okay. Yeah, exactly. The person who I'm meant to like have that relationship with will be okay with that. And if I meet, dude 1, 2, and 3, and they can't accept, how I am approaching relationships now, well then, okay. move along. Like that's all I have to
Exactly.
say
That's
about
what I
it.
need to
Like,
do for my well-being. And like that is the cure for codependency. The cure for codependence is independence. And independence does not mean being single, yo. What it means is being able to understand and care for your own feelings. And that is not the same thing as never accepting emotional support from another person, but rather being able to understand what's going on within you and take care of it appropriately. One of the things, like I've been healing forever and ever and ever, but it is not as if like people cross my path still. Like one of the things that happened for me was a married guy kept pressuring me to have a relationship with him, and I wouldn't do it. And like nothing ever happened there. It was very much from a remove. And as the course of 2 years went on, he was somebody that kept crossing my path. Again, not in a romantic context, but he desired one. I found out that he was one of the biggest liars I have ever met. Like whenever I speak to him, he tells me a lie. I make a game out of it now. I wonder what he's going to lie about today. Like, and it just goes on and on. And what he had presented to me about his relationship was not the truth of his relationship, because I live close enough to these people that I'm able to see a lot more. And I understood after a certain time point that he was deceiving me. And one of the things that I had to heal was, and when you are healing codependency, because you are dealing with your damaged inner child, your trust mechanisms may need to be matured. Now, please understand that if you are being told that you are still working on emotional maturation, that is not the same thing as calling you immature. It is saying that your trust mechanisms, your love mechanisms, your security mechanisms all exist in the unhealed space of your inner child or your formative experience. And the way to overcome them is to do the self-parenting, which is the self-talk that we're talking about, where you learn to speak to yourself appropriately. You do not need somebody else to build you up if you know how to do it yourself. You do not need somebody else to take care of you if you know how to do it yourself. You do not need somebody to run guard for you if you are fully capable of picking up your own sword and your shield and going, what do I slay today? Because I can do it. And you can learn how to do these things. And it does mean taking that very trusting part of you from the child space where you see the world as you are. If you are a loving and a trusting person, you have a tendency to question the things that you see in another person in a way that negates them. Meaning you can see a red flag in somebody, because my ex-husband was a red flag factory. Sincerely, I've shared the thing where like, right? I shared the thing where the first time I ever even had lunch with him, he told me he hated people. And I felt sorry for him because I was like, oh, I wonder what happened to him. Now, there is some validity to that because clearly like something happened to the dude, but it's not our job to fix people. Partners are not projects. Please do not get involved with somebody with who you think they can be. That is the big one for codependent people. You're not there to heal together. Get together, heal yourself, then you'll attract a healed person. What do you have? You have a secure attachment. If you try to make your relationships part of your healing process, it causes codependency. And what causes codependency on a societal level is that this is where you need to forgive yourself to understand that we are all programmed to be codependent on some level, whether it is to a church, whether it is to a political party, whether it is to a family unit. You are told societally that your identity, your worth in this world is tied to a structure. It's not. It is only your own and whatever form of divine presence that you have in your life, which can simply be your highest self, trying to achieve your highest self. Understand that if you have tendencies towards codependency, and particularly as a woman in patriarchal societies, I'm not here to blow up anything or tear anything down, but a patriarchal society, which is what we have, all of the main churches in our country are led by male figureheads, have male figures in their doctrine, which is a story that was built around the aspect of faith rather than being faith itself. Please learn to differentiate between faith and religion. They are not interchangeable concepts. Find faith or belief within, and that is not in a divine power, but belief in yourself is one of the things that can help heal codependency. If you heal yourself, if you take the time to do that, you will not accept people that should not be there, who are actually there to help shine a light onto the cracks that are still in your foundation that you are looking for them to fill. So, like I said, super deep subject, but we've gotten into this, like the top of it. And I'm not going to like overwhelm anybody. We'll start wrapping it up here and we'll do more going forward if you're still willing to, you incredibly patient and kind soul. Because like I said, he's sitting around at home sometimes and I'm texting him going, hey, do you want to talk about the weightiest crap on earth? It'll be really fun. He's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Well, like, I mean, like I've told you before, and I tell my siblings this all the time. I was just like, let me be your cautionary tale. Like, I've made as many mistakes as a man can make at this point, in very many aspects. So if excuse me, if someone listens to this and they get something out of it, then good. I'm glad I lived that experience so you don't have to, or that it can shorten your negative experience, because it's not fun to wake up at 35 and been like, damn, I wasted like 10 years of my life, being unhealed when I could have done a lot more work.
Please understand that, like, we get an absolutely, I'm going to swear again, bullshit agenda around aging. We are told
Sure.
that the worth of your life and the interest in it and your passion and your drive, and it will all diminish with age. That is not true. What happens is that people become disappointed because they think the bulk of their experience is behind them. If you keep going towards growth and change and interest in life and ever expanding interest, you will truly never feel old, because you will always be bringing something new into your life, which is vital, which revives you. But I hear you as well. Part of the reason that I do this, and some of it doesn't make me look all that good, because like I said, 20s, oh my God. I have never seen a healthy relationship. So I did not take marriage very seriously. So the first time I got married, he went on to have a 30-year marriage. He's perfectly happy. They have 4 kids together. Mazel tov. Keep going. I hope that you're happy until the end of time, sincerely. But
Right.
I was a toxic waste dump of absolutely unhealed trauma. And did he pay for it?
Likewise, yeah.
Did he have sound issues? Yes, he did. It was not a case of, there were no villains and heroes. There were just people with damage finding each other. And
Right.
please remember that if you have had a series of unrewarding relationships, stop hiding from what it might mean. Take the flashlight, look into yourself, and ask yourself not, why did that happen? But rather, why did I make those choices and set myself up for this? Because that is a key in healing. And it's not about self-blame. It is about understanding the role that we play in the formation of every relationship, both to self and to others, that is in our lives. When we talk about fate, there are fateful occurrences, but there are only a handful of them in the course of a lifetime. And your life path will guide you back to these fateful occurrences. For the most part, our life is made up of, and tarot would be minor arcana, made up of our choice. Most of our life is built on our choices. If you have not made the best choices in the past, don't think that is about your worth, your character, or anything about your ability to love or be loved. It means that there is something within you that you need to rehabilitate, as if you are in physical therapy. Please stop divorcing your emotional response system from the idea that it can be injured and damaged in the exact same way your physical body can, because it can be. If your emotional structure was fundamentally damaged, the good thing is that you possess the power to go back and to reconstruct it into a thriving and a healthy shape. You can have better relationships, and you do not need to stay single. And when you have healthy love in your life, because all of my friendships now are healthy, and they're really good friendships, and I really like the people in my life. And will I ever have love in my life again? I genuinely do not know. It is not a big priority for me. Being happy in my life and accomplishing some things where I try to help other people heal from, avoid my mistakes. Like you said, be a cautionary tale wherever you can be. All right, Jacob, we're going to wrap this one up. I'm sure we'll have to revisit it at a different point, but the 3 points that we were addressing today were, if you have any of this, anything other than the secure attachment style, which, like I said, 56% in 1980, I doubt that percentage has gone up. You all have a lot of company. You have a lot of company. But through work, through cognitive behavioral therapy, through examining self without judgment or recrimination, but understanding, you can entirely rebuild your foundation. You can have a completely different life, and you can have relationships that are fun rather than draining and taxing. Jacob, where can people find you, my friend?
Still the best place is on Facebook. So Southern Style
Oh.
Readings on Facebook. The shop and messenger is always open.
He is an excellent reader, guys. He's my reader. Jacob he's incredibly gifted at helping me understand what is coming up emotionally, which is what I personally need. If you think you want to know the events that are coming up, you don't. You want to know how you're going to feel about them, because that's what really gives you the arsenal that you need to either build your robust future or put your shields up. And you can find me at therisingmoon.com. I do a form of tarot that is focused mostly on emotional healing and helping people understand themselves, but I also do predictive tarot. I just really groove on the emotional healing tarot. And then I also do life coaching. You can book a session for that at therisingmoon.com. I have a YouTube channel that gives daily readings, and that is Cronecast at the Rising Moon. That's on YouTube. And this is Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Thank you so much for joining me. Live magically, heal, and be truly well.